Hello, and welcome to Running the Table, the podcast where we run through everything on the table in the world of sports. And some people never thought this day would come, but the GOAT is done. Tom Brady has retired from the game of football after 22 illustrious seasons with the Patriots and the Buccaneers. The NFL is finally free of Tom Brady, for better or for worse. And we're going to take a deep dive into his career, his legacy, and what he meant to the game, because he was a phenomenal player and he will dearly be missed in the game of football as a player. So, Tim, you ready to get into it?
Let's run it.
So, Tom Brady, what can we say about him other than the greatest quarterback to ever do it? He has played longer than anybody else, better than anyone else. The numbers speak for themselves. He holds career records in almost every major passing category for the career, regular season and postseason. He still holds a couple single season NFL records, and that's not even scratching the surface, because then you go into the Super Bowls. He has 7 of them, which is more than any team has won. 6 with the Patriots and 1 with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So how do we appropriately do Tom Brady justice and sum up the legend that is TB12 other than GOAT? Tim, what do you got?
I mean, he's a player that if you were a fan of basically football and any other team other than the Patriots up until these last 2 years, you kind of grew to hate the dude, because if you came into contact with him, chances are you were likely going to lose, because that was just sort of the mantra and existence of Tom Brady throughout his entire career. Ever since he took over for Drew Bledsoe, he just kind of got the ball rolling and kept building and building his potential and his ceiling, and year in and year out putting up those numbers like pretty much no one else could. It's hard to put into actual words what he meant to the game, because you talk about like there are guys over the years where you talk about like the face of football in that year. But if you talk about the face of football in the 21st century, it's Tom Brady. Year in and year out, pretty much no matter what, whether he's won or lost, it's been about him, whether it was his successes or his shortcomings.
Well, he's been the one constant throughout our lives in the game of football. He's been playing literally the entire
longer than us when we have been alive.
Literally longer than either one of us have been alive. He was drafted in 2000, and we all know the fascinating story of the 6th round pick that was never supposed to be
199.
Yep. Tom Brady, the skinny, scrawny, unathletic kid from Michigan, who, when was tasked with filling that role for the franchise quarterback and Drew Bledsoe, stepped up.
He just snatched it and never let it go.
And the rest is history. And he's definitely a first ballot Hall of Famer. There's no doubt.
If there was ever like an auto lock for first ballot Hall of Famer, no one could possibly fill that position better than Tom Brady.
Absolutely, because what he meant to the game, he simply redefined greatness, because you have these, you can define like different eras by the different generations of quarterbacks. Like in the 90s, it was, Elway, Marino, Favre, Aikman, Steve Young. In the 2000s, it was, Manning, Roethlisberger, Rivers, like both Peyton and Eli. To the
both Mannings.
Yeah. In the 2010s, you got guys like, Rodgers, Stafford, and then in the new generation, Mahomes, Allen, Burrow. But the one constant through all of like these last 3 eras, Tom Brady has been the one constant that has kind of broken the mold.
He's been there basically the whole time. He's seen so many guys come and go, so many draft classes just go completely extinct, while he just
like
remained.
In his time with the Bucs, he could use, he could talk trash to people by saying, I played against your dad. Like, that is how long he's been around. He could use that. And I think that in and of itself is really nuts. He is older than a lot of the coaches in the NFL. Like, he's older than Matt LaFleur, Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan.
I think it was it the divisional round, I think, that he alone was older than any of the other opposing teams head coach in
Yeah,
the
yeah.
NFC.
LaFleur, Shanahan, and McVay. He's older
Yeah,
than
all
all of
three of
them,
them.
and well, the longevity is absolutely unmatched, and that's where I think his individual greatness lies. Team greatness with winning Super Bowls, that's a whole nother can of
Yeah.
worms. That is another part of the Tom Brady legacy. But the fact that he is an MVP finalist and he was setting NFL records in his final season at age 44 is something that we've never seen, not just in football, but in major North American sports. Because you think about the great athletes, you always compare Brady to Jordan in terms of rings. Jordan has 6, Brady has 7, but Jordan kind of faded out into the twilight with the multiple retirements and then his last short stint with the Wizards. But Brady at age 44 just kept trucking right along. His recovery methods were a little bit different. His way of training was a little bit different, but clearly it works.
Clearly, he's doing something right.
Because I think he can definitely play another year or two.
Oh,
if he really
he could if he
to.
wanted to, but
If
I
he
feel like
really wanted
at his stage in life, as he made clear in his retirement announcement, it was more about the mental and competitive edge about it, where he'd been doing it for so long. And clearly he showed this year that he had the ability, and he still has the ability, to play with the best of the best, and play at the highest level, especially with the roster that he had.
Well,
But
I think, yeah,
the
I
one thing
think
you
that
mentioned about longevity that I think is really impressive. One of the things that I came across is Tom Brady lived for 8,292 days before he was drafted into the NFL. And he remained in the NFL 961 days, which means that he has spent nearly half of his life playing professional football, 49%. That's insane. Because you think about quarterbacks and the way guys can get beat up over the years and have their career ended short via injury or just general wear and tear. And for him to spend half of his life not only playing the game, but almost the entire time playing it at the highest level. And I think that, as you talked about the longevity being one of his biggest factors in individual greatness, to me, that just, it completely blows my mind to think about that amount of time playing a professional sport, one of arguably the most physically taxing.
Well, I think the fact that Tom Brady's been playing, football, like starting, because the first year he sat the bench as the third string quarterback, he's been the starting quarterback somewhere longer than we've been alive. I think that in and of itself is enough of a mind bend, like we're in college now.
It's hard to fathom. It's
hard,
legitimately hard to fathom that
at
amount of
least
time.
for us to,
Yeah, because that's our lifespan.
Wrap our minds around that Brady's been playing longer than we've been alive. But I think when it comes to longevity and him being able to play another year or two, I think that we get into like why he retired, because what he said on his podcast, on his Let's Go podcast about a week ago, he was talking about how it was a family decision and how it's not always about what I, as in Tom Brady, want. It's about what we, as in like Tom Brady and family, like want as a family. Because like he says on like Man, especially the latter episodes of Man in the Arena, like as he's gotten older, there are more factors that come in. Like when he was younger, it was just about football, but now he has Giselle, he
Multiple
has
children,
he has his kids. There's more to Tom Brady than the life of football, and that was a big factor for his retirement, because he wanted to spend time being that dad. He wanted to spend time with his kids, spend time with his wife, and I mean that's completely understandable. Yeah. And like I remember at the Super Bowl podium last year, Giselle asked Tom, like, what more do you have to prove? Which is a very good question, because from the outside looking in, and nobody can answer this question except for Tom himself, of what else do you have to prove? I mean, an outsider looking in, you have nothing left to prove. You won more championships than anybody else. You've won more games than anybody else, thrown for more yards, touchdowns, been the most accomplished quarterback, more Super Bowl MVPs. Like, you've done literally everything you could do in a career.
Everything in the sport.
What more could you possibly want? And I guess it was just time for Tom to walk away. And call it quits. I mean, good on him. He has had the greatest career a quarterback has ever had in the NFL. And I doubt we're going to see anybody like him anytime soon. And it's going to be a while before we see somebody playing at that high level until we're 44, like until they're 44. But
that alone is unheard of, much less, of course, at the highest level. And we talked about like his individual achievements. I don't even think this is everyone, but to put into perspective, the amount of categories in which he is first in all time, you've got passing yards, passing touchdowns, wins, win percentage, total EPA, total WPA, Pro Bowl, Super Bowl appearances, Super Bowl wins, Super Bowl MVPs, conference championship appearances, playoff passing yards, playoff touchdowns, playoff EPA, playoff wins, 4 touchdown games, and he has the best season in terms of QBR in the history of the NFL. So as you said, major category, it's his.
I mean, that doesn't even scratch the surface of the list. I mean, I could,
because there are plenty
more. I could go to the bathroom. I could get a glass of water. I could eat a snack. I could, work on some homework. I could do whatever I want. And I'd come back and you'd still be rattling off the list of records that Tom Brady holds. So, I mean, it's been amazing. And, the TB12 legacy will definitely, it's in a class of its own. And as far as the great athletes of all time goes, you have to include Tom Brady in that conversation. So that's all I got on Tom. He's gone from the NFL. It's going to be very hard to picture an NFL without him, but they're going to have to go forward with it.
Yeah, it's definitely very interesting and very weird to look at it from the perspective of a fan of a certain team, and then as like a fan of the game, because as a fan of a certain team, you're like, oh my gosh, he's finally gone. Like, obviously you'll have quarters that you have to get through that going to be on your team, but he was always that one guy. But of course, as a fan of the game itself, it's like you never really wanted to see the end of this era because it was just so incredibly impressive, the way it just kept going and going, and you felt like it was never going to stop. But of course, now we have come to the inevitable end, and to look at it in retrospect is like you were able to see and sort of
nobody defeats Father Time. Nothing is constant. Change is inevitable. And that new leaf has been turned where that generation of quarterbacks, Brady,
he said it himself. To be able to hand
they're all done. They're done now.
Yeah, and he said it himself. Like the sport is in good hands with this new generation of quarterbacks to hand it off to. And there's plenty of talent to be had throughout the league. But another thing that's really interesting to look at is not only what does the league do from now on of a world without Tom Brady, but you look at specifically the Bucs, because like you knew that time was coming, but you weren't ever like, it was never necessarily in the Bucs mindset, I don't think, of, oh, we got to prepare now for when Tom's going to retire, because it's like you never knew whether it was going to be like the 1 more year or the 3 more years or whatever. So now they're in a bit of an interesting position of,
well, I mean,
what do you do now?
I don't think like the Buccaneers is clearly as important as like Tom Brady himself. We can get into that in more detail in another episode if you so wish. But I think it definitely is an interesting scenario for the Buccaneers because that championship window is now shut. You're not winning with Blaine Gabbert, Ryan Griffin, or Kyle Trask. Yeah, that's who they have on the roster. And I mean, there are no really tantalizing free agent quarterbacks or, rookie quarterbacks in this year's draft that you can say like, okay, we're going to add them and then we're going to win now.
Yeah, like you can,
unless you trade for like Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers or Derek Carr. I think that window for the Buccaneers is done. It was a fun ride. They have their ring that they can hold their hat on, and the memories with Tom Brady, it's there forever. And same thing with the Patriots. Tom Brady will definitely be remembered in both of those franchises forever.
Yeah, absolutely. He has cemented his status. Yeah, he has cemented his status in both of those teams' histories, in obviously everywhere he possibly could in the NFL's record books and their history. And it's going to be hard to touch a lot of those stats, mostly because a lot of them are based on longevity. It's hard to break, other than like the single season stuff. It's hard to break a lot of those records which was part of the reason why, like, for like passing yards and passing touchdowns, why Brady, Breeze, and Manning were kind of a lot of shuffling around those top three because of how long they played individually. But of course, none of them could outlast Tom. So it's going to be hard to see if anybody's going to be able to touch a lot of those cumulative records that Brady holds. And to be fair, it's in a lot of cases he kind of deserves to stay at the mountaintop there, unless someone comes along with even more greatness and they're able to do. But I mean, you talk about a special player, generation inspiring, young players wanting to play the game and play the position because of the guy. Truly an incredible role model for the game of football for this past 22 years.
Well, I think that just about does it, because I have nothing more to say, because once again, what could I say that tops whatever the heck Tim just said? I mean, granted,
you know me, my monologuing.
Yeah, Tim, I'll let you go on your monologue. You want to wrap this episode up too while I still got you here?
You know, I'm happy to
go for it. It's all yours.
Because hey, you know, obviously we've been covering this entire set of playoffs. We are coming out with our Super Bowl predictions, and of course, we'll do a recap on that soon. We've got all of our stuff going back throughout the entire playoffs. We've got a little baseball mixed in there, a little hockey mixed in there, and we're really excited for some of the stuff that we've got cooking and coming up here soon once the NFL wraps up. So it'll be real fun to watch and see what happens for this upcoming week and what we're able to do after this. So appreciate all the support, and until then, peace.